So I, kind of picking up when we had our Veterans Roundtable yesterday, one of the things was how we can integrate these services. So I was wondering, first of all, Mr. Wordin, and then I wanted to kind of ask everyone this question, what 3 things can we do? Maybe give us some action items for each of you to get what you're working on advanced and out to more of our veterans.
Well, the first thing is easy. It's funding. I mean, the technology groups, I think, in all the speeches talked about funding and the need for more funding for technology because it will have such a large impact. I mean, we talked yesterday in the forum about how, for example, people are trying to justify or understand how valuable equine therapy is. Well, if every participant was wearing a HeroTrack device, you'd be able to tell immediately the overall mental and physical impact that therapy was having on that particular person. And so then you can make better informed decisions as both a patient, as a clinician, as a Congress, on where to appropriate and prioritize that funding. Technology will continue to evolve, and I would say that's the second issue, is as technology evolves, particularly our device will become even more powerful. As phones become more powerful, as the wearable technology becomes more powerful, the battery life improves, the reliability of the algorithm improves, the device will become even more efficient and even more valuable. And then the third thing is just being able to work within the VA system, which I think is the biggest source of frustration for veterans. In that study that was quoted, where they talked about inconvenience, long wait times, paperwork, transportation, and stigma, the VA has its challenges, but also the way that VA treats nonprofits, outside groups, and how we can interact with them is very, very complicated. I mean, we're lucky. We're one of the few. We were the first with Secretary Shulkin to be an authorized mental health and suicide prevention program of the VA. But even with that official designation, we still have a hard time working with individual VA medical centers. And so how can we fix, I don't even know if fix is the right word, but how can we make it so that while it's a lot easier to deal with the active duty component with DOD, it's very, very complicated with the VA, and it's still the federal government. There's still supposed to be one rule book.
Okay. And Ms. MacCallum and Mr. Meek, what has been your experience in working with the VA, and how can we help advance? And obviously, I think we all agree, getting more funding directed into this, but how can we integrate better? Good.
Well, just looking at the VA request for 2019, $198 billion, $727 million of that request is for medical prosthetic research. So funding is clearly one of the big issues. And when I think about SoldierStrong, there's 170 VA medical centers in the country, and this goes to what Mr. Wordin was saying. We have devices in 12 of them so far. So the issue of scale and scaling up so that these devices are more available to veterans across the country is clearly one of the big goals here. And then, in terms of what I do, I just think communication and helping people to understand across the country what our veterans go through when they get home. I mean, I think that's a message that we need to continue to spread, and that's something that, I would like to see more news organizations spend more time on, and that's an effort that I would make. I look at one of the quotes from one of the veterans that we've spoken to. He said, you feel like a burden and you avoid social situations. So that alone is such a hampering factor to moving forward. So we want to find a way to, help veterans feel especially when they're using these devices, that they're not in the way, that they're normal, that they're part of society. And I think raising awareness through greater communication is something that will go a long way to that.
Oh, thank you.
I think to agree with Mr. Wordin, I think the two things that you can do are first to pass legislation, making this technology available to all veterans, but more importantly is finding the appropriations. It's one thing to pass a bill, but if you can't pay for it, it's not going to do anybody any good. There's several great organizations up here all doing some great things, But at the end of the day, we're all fighting for the same private sector, private donor dollar. There's only so much of that out there. And so getting help from people like yourself in this committee will really help transform the lives of those veterans who need it.
And I think one of the things I think you've all demonstrated and testified a little to, when these devices and these things are made available, if it's lowering PTSD, if it improves outcome, we actually do have long-term savings here from, as well as obviously improved quality of life and the right thing to do. So there is a win-win result from this.
Well, and as you mentioned before, a lot of these devices were originally funded through DARPA. And what we're finding now is that there's no DARPA for veterans when they come back home. And so that's what I think organizations like ours are trying to backfill here, is to step up and fill that void.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see my